Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ernie. Thanks for checking out this video. It's all about great albums released in July of 2017. Hope you find something you like. Here we go. So the first band I'm going to be talking about is called Great Grandpa. They released their album Plastic Cough on July 7th via double whammy. It's the Seattle-based band's full-length debut, and if you're familiar with the band's 2015 EP Can Opener, you'll have an idea of what to expect. The biggest noticeable difference between the two is a step up in production value. The band has kept their unpredictably quirky and sometimes frenetic style of songwriting for their debut, and this was a great idea. This quality, it keeps listeners on their toes and adds an extra level of excitement when listening to this record. They play with dynamics, tempos, and vocal delivery in a way that forces you to pay attention. If you could only listen to one song off this great record, I'd suggest the album opener, Teen Challenge. Next we have Katie von Schleicher and her album SHITTY Hits, released July 28th, and Katie's story is a pretty interesting one. At the end of her internship with Bada Bing Records, the head of the label told her that if she finished an album, they would put it out for her. Katie's debut Bleexploitation was released in 2015, and 2 years later that same label is responsible for the follow-up by the Maryland-based singer-songwriter. Higher production value and a more experienced approach to songwriting makes her sophomore effort feel like a step in the right direction. And on her Bandcamp page, Katie's described the album as good time songs you can have a bad night with while driving alone. Honestly, I don't know if I can sell the album to you better than that sentence can, so I'm just going to leave you with my recommendation off the record, and it is the song, The Image. Next we have Soft Sounds from Another Planet by Japanese Breakfast, out July 14th, 2017 on the Dead Oceans record label, and it's the second studio album by Philly-based artist Michelle Zauner under the Japanese Breakfast name. And the band's debut, Psychopomp, laid a wonderful foundation for what would come next, but I'm sure I wasn't the only person floored by the sheer quality and originality found on this record. From the 6.5-minute opener to the 1-minute instrumental closer, Soft Sounds from Another Planet keeps you guessing. Just when the album seems to feel as if it's settling into a somewhat familiar vibe, Zauner veers in a different direction. And it's never a direction that seems forced or unnecessary. Honestly, this is one of my favorite things about this LP. You can tell that Zauner knows what she's capable of and understands how to best utilize her vocals and songwriting in such a way where one never truly outshines the other. If you're looking for a great experimental alternative indie rock album, make sure to seek out Soft Sounds from Another Planet. If I can only recommend one track, as difficult as it is to choose, it would be Boyish. Moving on, we have the band Arcade Fire with the album Everything Now, out July 28th through Columbia Records. It's the Canadian band's 5th studio album, and it's the follow-up to 2013's Reflector, and on it, the band continues to shift away from the rock sounds found on their earlier work and into the electronic music space. To put things broadly, the theme of this album is consumerism, and how technology is hurting us as a society by conditioning us to want everything now. If I'm being honest, this theme falls a bit flat. In my opinion, it's the songs that stray away from this idea that end up being the highest points on the album. Everything Now is far from Arcade Fire's best record, but it's a solid album nonetheless. I mean, they're one of those bands that even at their worst, they put out really great music. On this album, the songs are expertly arranged, and the blending of rock, electronic, dance, and disco make for a fun and energetic listen. If I could only recommend one track off the record, I'd direct you towards the single Creature Comfort. On July 7th, the band Breakfast Muff, and yes, there is a band called Breakfast Muff, released the album Eurgh through Amour Fou Records. It's the third LP by the Glasgow Rockers, and of the 3 records, this one took the longest for the band to record, with the process lasting a whopping 4 days. 4 days to record an album. What were they thinking? But in all seriousness, that urgency and tension that you would imagine comes from recording a full album in such a short period of time comes through on the album. I know that it may sound like a critique, but that feeling and sound is exactly what makes Eurgh a standout. The songs are not polished and perfect. There's a sense of grit and rawness to the tracks that works perfectly with the lo-fi alternative punk sound that Breakfast Muff achieves here. The album at times may feel slightly unfinished, but that's where it gets its charm, there in the excellent way that the band's vocalists work together. The songs are fast and short, but if you still only have time to listen to one off of the album, I'd suggest Magic Carpet. Next we have Manchester Orchestra with A Black Mile to the Surface, released July 29th via Loma Vista Recordings. It's the 5th LP from the band from Atlanta, Georgia. Manchester Orchestra are one of those bands that I'd always heard about, but just never got around to listening to. It's clear now that I've been missing out. They take that orchestra at the end of their name very seriously. This album is full of epic, excellently produced, emotionally heavy, and complex music. This LP sort of takes listeners on an almost cinematic journey. If you're looking for an album to take you away and just envelop you in a world of music, give this record a shot. If I could direct you towards one song on the album, which is sort of difficult because they bleed into one another and sort of create this all-encompassing just album experience, I'd have to pick The Mistake. Next we have the album Lost World by the band Tropics. It was out July 7th through Shelf Life and Fast Cut Records. It's the debut album by the Chicago band, and if you're a fan of 80s nostalgia-tinged sounds in your shoegaze indie rock albums, then pick this one up. Grown from a two-person project in 2011 to the full-fledged four-piece band they are today, Tropics have accomplished one of my favorite feats, and that's creating a sound that's both modern, new, and exciting, all while invoking a sense of familiarity at the same time. The band describes their sound as equal parts celebratory and introspective, and this is represented perfectly through the 9 tracks the band puts forth on Lost World. The jangly guitars, glittery riffs, and constant switching between vocalists Nicky Navarro and Lauren Vanderbilt III makes this album a great listen. Disclaimer, the band has a new singer named Molly, so if you go see them, you're not going to see Nicky Navarro. If I could recommend one track off of the record, it would be the song Lost World. Next we have the album Secret Memos by the band Shiny Times, and it's a self-released album by Kim Hart Weldon and was out July 14th, 2017. It looks to be the sophomore full-length release by the musician from South Carolina. If you're familiar with her main project, Tape Waves, you'll have some kind of idea of what to expect on this record, but that being said, this is very much a Shiny Times album. Weldon has done an amazing job making this LP her own. On her Bandcamp, she writes of her music, "I write songs in my bedroom with my guitar and computer." That DIY approach comes through on this album. It's 11 lo-fi tracks that seem slightly unfinished in the best possible way. Full of fuzzy and glitter guitar, dreamy vocals, and overflowing with reverb, the album is perfect if you're looking for a quality soundtrack to just chill out and relax to. There are a lot of great tracks on this record, but if I had to pick out one song for you to listen to, it would be Not True. Next we have Out in the Storm by Waxahatchee, released July 14th on Merge Records. And it's the highly anticipated, rightfully so, everything she's released has been awesome, 4th studio album by the Philly rocker. Katie Crutchfield, the mind behind Waxahatchee, has created a sound that would be at home in the 90s, surrounded by bands like the Breeders, the Cranberries, and a number of other bands fronted by kick-ass women. Grungy, lo-fi guitar riffs coupled with Crutchfield's powerful yet vulnerable vocal delivery make this album a pleasurable listen. But there's so much more to this record than just what's happening musically. Lyrically, this record explores personal topics, an example being the experience of being in a destructive long-term relationship, with an element of awareness and honesty that is something of a rarity these days. Start to finish, Out in the Storm is an amazing album. If you were unlucky enough to only be able to listen to one track off of this great record, I'd recommend A Little More. And finally, we have the record Verse by the band People Like You, released July 28th on Top Shelf Records. It's a sophomore record by the band out of Boston, and bands like these just don't come along often enough. They take from different genres of music and use them to create their own space. In the case of People Like You, it's mostly jazz with elements of emo, punk, indie, alternative, spoken word, math rock. Honestly, you think of the genre, there's probably elements of it in this record. And I know that seems like it would turn out being a mess, but they find a way to seamlessly flow through this landscape of sound in ways that make you wonder, why isn't this done by more bands? It's this ability to change gears so effortlessly that makes Verse an exciting listen. The musicianship on the record is top shelf, and the harmonizing between vocals is excellent. If you appreciate new bands experimenting and being honest to who they are as musicians, this is a great record for you to check out. One song I'd recommend off of the album for you is called Yulita Terrace. So those 10 great albums released in July of 2017. If you want to check out any of the songs I mentioned, I have links to Spotify and Vivity playlists in the description below, as well as some social media. You can follow me on there. As always, if I've missed something that I should be listening to, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.